CFS Alert, which was founded 4 years ago by myself and my friend Deborah Waroff. Recently, the National Institutes of Health has asked the public to comment on its P2P, Pathways to Prevention, program based on a study. It is an approach which has offended many in the community, including Deborah, who has suffered from ME for 25 awful long years. It seems unserious. It seems like a bureaucratic solution. I wanted her to share her comments with you, or at least those that we have enough time to share. You'll find some of them angry, some of them really intolerant, or seemingly so, and many of them critical. It is because there is a time for anger, a time for intolerance, a time to be critical. The nonsense has gone on long enough, and it is time that it stopped, and that the government of the United States took on its serious, sacred duty of looking after the people who are suffering. And that means finding the money to fund serious, important, effective research, not studies, not name changes, etc. Just listen to Deborah. Here she is.
My interest is to look at whether a certain project the National Institutes of Health is working on serves the interests of the American people. The NIH, as it happens, is putting together an American Idol-style mock jury trial. This mock trial will decide how the NIH will approach research into the horribly disabling disease, myalgic encephalomyelitis, or chronic fatigue syndrome, as it's sometimes known, for the foreseeable future. The jury for this will be chosen on purpose from people who don't know anything about the disease. They will get to know only what the NIH wants them to know, mainly by studying a report the NIH commissioned from the Portland VA Research Foundation, which is actually a private nonprofit located on VA grounds. This is odd since the newspapers have described the VA as being flooded with work and also not being competent, but here we are. But hey, this suits the NIH. Maybe places like Harvard or Stanford would have too many ideas. This project is called Pathways to Prevention, or P2P. When you look at the draft of the report on the project from Portland, you will realize right away that this is not about preventing disease. It's the opposite. The prevention intended is to prevent science getting done, especially to prevent medical science getting done, and most especially to prevent medical science that might cure a devastating neuroimmune disease, ME to be precise. This is actually easy to prevent. NIH has been doing it for years. Scientists who can get other research funded noticed years ago that they can never get NIH grants for ME. This helps NIH to prevent science being applied to ME. The whole NIH budget for ME runs only about $5 million annually. But even with only $5 million, the NIH manages to prevent a good portion of that time going to serious biomedical science. A big chunk usually goes to psychological studies. Some are interesting, but they do not interfere with preventing biomedical science from curing ME. In fact, they help prevent biomedical science. But NIH uses this as a great excuse for not funding ME. Not enough people apply for grants, a spokesperson explained to the Washington Post by way of saying why there isn't more funding. Well, of course people don't apply. After an entire generation of turndowns, who would be fool enough to waste time filling out grant applications for ME, at least in biomedical research? And nothing has changed. This year, even Dr. Ian Lipkin, world-famous virus hunter, got a turn down when he tried to do science on ME. He was prevented. Now he's forced to raise money for a project through group funding. NIH could get the wheel turning again if it wanted to, in fact. All it has to do is send out a request for application, RFA, and it would attract plenty of applicants. It could, in fact, assign projects internally. It has thousands of scientists working for it. But it won't. When it comes to ME, the NIH isn't there to prevent a devastating disease. It's there to prevent people doing scientific research to understand the devastating disease. It's there to prevent anyone learning enough to cure the devastating disease. Could this improve with the P2P? Au contraire, worse lies ahead. This is the final nail on the coffin. To judge by the draft evidence review the Portland people submitted. Those authors weren't supposed to know anything about ME to start with, but someone must have helped them get this on the wrong track. There are two major strategies that lead to the sabotage of science that are followed in this report. One is that 8 different definitions, most attributed to CFS, have been thrown in from the far-flung corners of the earth. Some are as different as night and day, ranging from just fatigue to the most devastating neurological, brain inflammation, pains, etc., etc. They're not the same. It's like amalgamating data from rubella and Ebola to produce a meta-analysis. After all, they are both viral and they both have R's in their name. The second strategy that is visible simply discards results from trials and researchers that the NIH group is not in tune with. It includes those that are in with the in crowd, you might say. For example, the 1988 study by the late Stephen Strauss, he was in with the in crowd, was designed to test the efficacy of aciclovir in ME and CFS. He used only 27 human subjects. He declared aciclovir useless. His result was disproven. Aciclovir can be very useless. In contrast, the group discarded Dr. Jose Montoya's very successful trial of valganciclovir in recent years, although its successes have been replicated, which is the standard for science. Why? Why was it rejected? They marked it as insufficient for having only 32 subjects. They decided that was too few. Okay, 27 is enough for antiviral aciclovir, but 30 is not enough for antiviral valganciclovir. Now 27 is bigger than 30, or P2P is now expanding to prevention of mathematics. The world might be better off. This is protection for the innumerate. So what is going on here? Scientists and clinicians struggling on meager budgets, mainly from private sources, have made a lot of progress in the science of ME in the past 7 or 8 years. They really have. The science now is finally where it should have been in 1990 if NIH had only funded research on a par with other immune disease, or given it perhaps 20% of AIDS budget. 2 diseases have about the same number of people. But now, stopping progression is the name of the goal. NIH has targeted this area of research to be drowned like a little kitten in the swimming pool. It will be. Memos have been released via FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, promising that NIH will flood the world with the results that they've already planted for P2P as soon as the report is ready or the final jury is finished, all in the interest of drowning out the science. NIH internal memos suggest plan to deluge audiences with reports, publications, press releases, and a media campaign. Remember GIGO? Garbage in, garbage out? Is this the best product for the NIH to furnish American citizens who are counting on it for their health? Prevention of the devastating disease ME, which disables some 1 million American citizens, would be very much in the interest of American citizens. No, all this plotting is very much against the interest of American citizens. It is subverting the will of Congress. It is subverting the intention of Congress, which voted to establish the NIH in 1930 for, quote, ascertaining the cause, prevention, and cure of diseases. You don't ascertain any of these by assembling inexperienced committees to compose collective opinions based on reams and reams of slanted and weak data. And especially as in P2P, you don't vulgarize necessary empirical scientific research by substituting a mock jury. In fact, this is treason. It's dressed in starched white coats. Treason dressed in white coats. P2B is every bit as traitorous as Benedict Arnold, and it persecutes decent American citizens, 1 million of us, with the senseless resolve of the late Senator Joseph McCarthy. Indeed, papers recently released in the FOIA, Freedom of Information, though much redacted, show amazing contempt for America's citizens, sheer contempt, and also a fierce determination to keep NIH goals and operations secret from those of us who pay their salaries. What is more, we the people are paying one heck of a lot for the counterproductive man-hours used to staff up this treason. We are paying for meeting after meeting of government salarymen and salarywomen plotting this counterproductive P2P project and figuring out how to enforce and avoid any real transparency. This latter you could just about glimpse around all the edges of the redactions. All this manpower suggests that the real cost will run over 2 million of our taxes, though we will only ever hear about the external expenses, now estimated at just under 500,000. What is really scary is that ME already costs the nation's GDP some $30 to $40 billion annually, B for billion, in lost productivity, not to mention lost lives, lost fathers, lost mothers, shut-in children, and so on. I had two goals in taking many hours to write comments on the evidence review draft report. I wished first to forward and pursue the interests of citizens of the United States in respect of the evidence review as contracted for and specified by employees of the National Institutes of Health, an agency of the executive branch of the United States government. Next time, I wish to lay out, as I did in written comments to the draft review, the historic events dating from 1984 to the present, which resulted in construction of the name chronic fatigue syndrome and its application to the Incline Village, Nevada outbreak of the disease formerly known as myalgic encephalomyelitis. The misnaming opened the way to disaster, we all know. The new name suffered identity theft by British psychiatrists who were ultra-prolific enough to publish their way to prominence. For, in fact, an altogether different non-biomedical but psychological phenomena which has led to mistreatment of British patients and to bibliographic disaster that has helped to make P2P unscientific and counterproductive. But that is for another time. For now, here's to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for us as well as the folks at NIH.